Hello students, today we are going to study the third chapter of David Copperfield. Children, you remember that in the previous chapter, that is chapter number 2, Mr. Murdstone had decided to send David to a boarding school as a punishment for his misbehavior. Now, the name of the third chapter is School Days, and the main characters that we come across in the chapter are Mr. Creakle, the headmaster of the school, Steerforth, one of the students in the school, Mr. Murdstone and Miss Murdstone, you are aware of, and Clara Copperfield, David's mother. These are the main characters whom we will come across in this chapter. Now children, the day David was about to leave for London, his mother wished him a quick goodbye and he set off for his journey for London. When he reached London, he thought that London was a very wonderful place because he saw those tall chimneys and a big and a large bridge called the London Bridge. And he reached to his school. But when he looked at his school, Salem House, he was quite disappointed because it was in a very old building which looked as if it was about to fall. The boys there were very noisy and very mischievous, but they were very friendly, except when Mr. Creakle, the headmaster, was around, because all the boys were really scared of Mr. Creakle. Whenever he was around, they would all be very silent and they would be silently doing their work because Mr. Creakle would shout at them and catch hold of any of the boys and would start beating them with his cane. So the children were really afraid of him, except for one student in the school, that was Steerforth, who was never beaten by Mr. Creakle. And David thought that he was the bravest and the most handsome boy in the school. Now David became friendly with Steerforth. Steerforth liked David because David narrated him those stories which he had from the books which he had read at home. This way he was still liking his school. But he had some unpleasant memories also of his school because they were all dragged out on cold frosty mornings out of their bed, and they were made to sit in the cold dark classrooms to study, and they were served meals of cold beef and stale bread, and then they had to work till late evening. So this way this was his routine in the school. It was time of vacation and then he had to go back home. When David reached home, he saw a small baby in his mother's arms, and his mother told him that that baby was David's brother. David fell in love with his brother the first day he set his eyes on him, and he would always try to carry him in his arms, but only when the Murdstones were not around, because Mr. And Mrs. and Miss Murdstone, they didn't want David to come near that baby. Once while Clara was comparing the baby's eyes with David's eyes, Miss Murdstone rebuked her and told her never to compare the features of her brother's baby with David. At home, he was ignored, and Mr. Murdstone was very cruel to him. He always called him a lazy boy, and so David felt almost unwanted in his own home. So when it was time for the vacation to get over and when he had to go back home, he was very happy because he still found that his school was better off than his home. He adjusted again in his school, and he thought that the worst thing that could happen in the school was that he would be beaten by Mr. Creakle. But worse than that also came to him. That was a dreadful news which he received about his mother's death. Mr. Creakle called David in his office and told him that his mother was dead and he was supposed to go home immediately. So he reached home, and he was so shocked and so sad when Peggotty told him about his mother's illness and the death of his half-brother too, because he also passed away the next day of his mother's death. And then after that, David felt very sad, and the whole world looked very gloomy to him. And he went for his mother's funeral, because she was also buried next to his father in the church yard. David became an orphan at the age of 10, and the world and life looked very gloomy to him. So we come to the end of the third chapter over here, children. So we will continue the story in the fourth chapter in my next video. See you then.